So the format will be that each of the panelists will first speak for 2 or 3 minutes on his thoughts on the subject, and then we move to discussion, and along the way we take questions as well, right? So Harish, why don't I start with you? Now, you've been around for a while, right? So you've seen old marketing, new marketing,
Yeah.
What's changed, what's different?
Okay, first of all, talking about the subject, which is classical marketing versus new age marketing, I would say, both are joined at the hip. They joined at the hip because many of the basic things which we follow in marketing don't change. Whether you are an e-commerce company, an IoT company in the space of actually productization, we're using the same old things. For instance, positioning. I think, the original definition of positioning, which is about 29 years, still hasn't changed within the Indian context. We believe in positioning. Everyone needs to position. Distribution, the way we distribute, none of that has changed. The focus on insight, I think none of that has changed as well. But some things have changed. And I think, I have worry lines on my brow when I think of these things. One of the first things I worry about today is the concept of brand trust. Because, the classical definition of a brand is the fact that the brand is a trust. And therefore, because it is a trust, it becomes a besottedness. And because it is a besottedness, it adds to the premium that you're able to charge. Now, in this quest for premiums, what's really happened is, I think we have gone a bit too berserk in India. And my worry is, encased in my forthcoming book. And the title of my book is, "The Brand is a Lie!" Exclamation mark. The brand is a lie. And that worries me because, it's all contextual. I think over the last 7 to 8 years, I think marketeers have gone berserk. I don't blame only marketeers because it's the environment that's gone berserk. It's the climate that's gone berserk. I think it's the art and skill of storytelling which has gone berserk as well. I think that is where we need to rein ourselves in. We have told too many stories. We have stretched the brand. The brand is an elastic, yes, but don't thin it so much that the brand becomes an incredulity. So the brand today has become a bit of a contentious word. Because the moment you talk about branding, there's a little bit of a worry. The same thing used to happen to advertising in the old days, and I'm being contentious, stay with me on this. You said you're an advertising person, people would look at you slightly differently and listen to your stories with a different degree of weighment. And the moment you said you are a brand person, people would look at you slightly differently, but they would still look at you with those lenses. Today, the brand is becoming a bad word, and that is my worry. And I think we have stretched the elastic of the brand a bit too much. Should we? Must we? And should we get into this generation which says the brand is a lie, a bundle of very carefully placed lies? Too few lies, the brand is boring. Too many lies, the brand is a distrust. Worry point.
So what you're saying is perhaps marketers need to be more honest and more real and more authentic.
Yes, I think, we need to be real, we need to be authentic. But again, I have this problem, Sanjeev, which is to say that, sometimes we think woke is real. Now, woke advertising is big time stuff today, if you really look at it. But woke is not real. Because sometimes woke is testing the waters of society a bit too much. I mean, we've had 2 instances of woke in the last week within the Indian context without taking brand names. I think sometimes we have pushed the gauntlet a bit too much. And when you hold a mirror back into society with woke, which you don't want to see, which you don't want to hear, even woke doesn't work. So I think woke has become super woke, and super woke doesn't work. But in fact, woke also doesn't work.
But maybe this is a direct consequence of too much clutter, too little time, social media. You got the need to go viral to grab attention and...
Absolutely. It's about the clutter media economy we live within. In the old days, it used to be television, press, print and radio, and these were curated mediums where there was an editor who would curate it all. But today we're really talking about uncurated mediums, 360-degree mediums. And to that extent, many of us around this table ourselves, are responsible for it. And I think equally, we have created a society where every Tom, Dick and Harish can publish his view. And when every TDH is saying what he wants to say, I think, there's a certain degree of communication anarchy. And this communication anarchy is making people wonder what is the truth and what is the lie. I just did a piece of research on advertising, in a traditional brick and mortar space. I compared it with, advertising of the e-commerce space. And guess what? People in India, across something like 27,000 sample size in urban India, believe advertising only by a factor of 52, which means that the disbelief factor of urban advertising is 48. In rural markets, I took the same darn thing, and the believability of advertising is only 37, whereas which simply means that 63 is disbelief. When advertising doesn't deliver, when brands don't deliver, when brands themselves get viewed by the lens of distrust, then the challenge is the brand a trust or is the brand a distrust?
So we'll come back to this or a deeper discussion later on. Can I move to you, Srinivas? Now, you're in an industry which over the last 20 or 30 years has seen significant change. It used to be dominance of public sector, not very customer-friendly, customer-oriented, less competition, and now it's moved to, private sector banks, foreign banks, mutual funds, private sector insurance companies, a whole bunch of things. We have really required this industry to begin to market, right? So what is your take on this?
No, I think you're right. I think the biggest challenge for legacy brands, so-called legacy brands, have always been that what used to be a kind of a pull product, people used to walk in for your product and services, has now become a push product because of sheer competition opening up of the markets. And we have friends here who really, the fintech industry has actually made a huge change to the way people perceive the financial services business. But really the marketing per se has not really changed for financial services. The classical marketing continues to be a very large portion of the way financial services do. But with the advent of fintech, that's kind of changed dramatically because of, one, the money power that some of these fintechs have thanks to the funding that they get, and also the innovative the approach to the way digital is come in a big way, the social media part of it. One of the interesting insights I'd like to give you, which is something which we have to all be worried at financial services industry, is that globally financial services industry, especially banks, are the least trusted entities. Like in US, when they do, CFA Institute does this survey, and then that comes out very, very low. But thankfully in India, the banks are still a very, very highly trusted entities. Financial services are highly trusted entities. So over a period of time, we will get there, and there's a huge marketing challenge for all of us to ensure that brand equity of these financial services entities have high level of trust. And we're really working hard. So for a marketer today, the big challenge in financial services is that one is breaking the clutter, because there's too much of clutter, and as you see, we are one of the largest spenders today in the industry. But a large part of it also comes from the fact that people will start distrusting the brand when there are too much of claims that are being made. And that's where I think the challenge starts. And today, for financial service industry, that's a big, big challenge.
So, look, there are a couple of things about the industry you represent. One is large parts of it are regulated, right? And therefore, there's regulation also on what you can say in your communication, what you can advertise, what you cannot advertise, and what disclaimers to put, and so on and so forth. And that is, I think, a lot more constraining, let's say, as opposed to, let's say, a consumer product company or a consumer services, other consumer services companies. So what's your take on that?
No, I think it's a phenomenally restrictive industry. I mean, I represent the mutual fund business, which is, you just can't say anything without a compliance approval. So even a personal comment like this, I need to tell what I'm disclosing before I come to a meeting like this. But the fact is that regulators are always worried about, because it's a trust industry, there is finances at stake. You're not buying a toothpaste or a toothbrush. It's money at stake. The regulator tend to be always cautious about how to approach this. Over time, they've got a little more liberal, but I think in a way, at the stage we are today, it's good that we get regulated largely from a messaging point of view. But I think in this era, there have been a lot of creativity in the communication ideas. We've seen some of them. In mutual funds, for example, every ad, you come with those 5-second disclosures saying mutual fund are subject to market risk.
And the faster you can say it, the less media time you consume and less money you spend.
But it used to be faster.
How fast can you say it? How fast can you say it?
I don't know about how fast I can say it, but sir, you're absolutely right that banks are trusted in India, but it's the jewelers who borrow from them who are not trusted as much.
Well, I mean, just on the disclaimer, it was so fast that the regulator came back and said, sorry, you've got to do all the disclaimer for the full 5 seconds. So now you've got to hear it.
So you're in an industry where the regulation also dictates the length of time for which the disclaimer must be said. That's right. That's okay. Okay. Great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Kunal. Now, as a startup entrepreneur, I mean, you've got to do 360-degree marketing all the time, from marketing to prospective co-founders, prospective employees, investors, and then your customers, right? What's your take on new age marketing versus classical marketing?
I think, first of all, we are all prisoners of the old vocabulary that we live in. I think, sometimes knowing too many words kind of makes you bucket these things and these things. According to me, wealth creation always has been about finding and discovering new motivations and making it easy to serve it. As long as you're doing that, you are always going to create wealth, and marketing is nothing different to that. But we are living in an interesting time where there is a chief technology officer in everybody's house, somebody who's between age 12 and 18. And this person is slowly becoming the chief procurement officer of the house also, because this person who understands technology is referred to by doing different things. And that person is not being served by some of the classical marketeers, because they tend to always think that this generation is ruined. And I don't know any generation who did not feel that about the next generation, but systematically they have been smarter, right? And that's the human history. Now the point is that for that particular generation, right, they are constantly looking for things that they will brag about, because all the humans under the age 25 have become ads. They are constantly projecting new things. They are all seeking likes, and there are, if you are not pretty or witty, the only way to get likes is to outrage now, right? So there is no, there's a pattern that is emerging right now where you are constantly trying to project anything new that you learn, and so on and so forth. So when you have billions of ads running, if your product is not becoming a story that they can make it into an ad and brag about it, in today's world, it's very hard to become a large company, right? And therefore, when people tell me that, hey, we are spending a lot of money on ads, and there are companies like, I know, like, let me ask you a question. How many of you know about Truecaller over here? And there's a company? Okay. And how many of you downloaded Truecaller because you saw an ad of Truecaller? Okay, nobody. The point I'm making is that there are enough and more ways to grow now in today's world where everybody is hyper connected like a superconductor. A meme becomes popular in a 1 hour's time. Why can't your message and content become viral? Because you don't understand what the user motivation is and what will they brag about. So I think we are living in a world where we are paying less attention to the chief technology officer, and therefore we are struggling with marketing.
Interesting, interesting. So, CJ, so before you come to what you want to say, so how does it feel like to be a substitute for Deep Kalra last minute? Up to 12th man we nahi the. I found you in the lobby and Deep got flu, unfortunately. And suddenly you're in the playing 11. And guys, so on your tablets, the questions you want to ask, you want to ask CJ, just address them to Deep, and I'll address them to CJ.
So my job is a little different to him. Here, Make My Trip has got substituted by Take My Trip. And I love the fact that earlier Harish you had mentioned about what people said when you told them you were an advertiser as opposed to working in branding. I am the son of middle class parents who did an MBA from Oxford University and came here to be a comedian. When I moved back to India, I remember an aunt asking me, she says, "Beta, tum kya karte ho?" I said, "Auntie, मैं comedian हूँ, मैं joke सुनाता हूँ." She said, "Beta, joke तो मैं भी सुनाती हूँ. तुम काम क्या करते हो?" But yeah, happy to substitute Deep.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts on marketing today versus what it was, say, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago?
Frankly speaking, today, let me address one thing off the top. You might, as an audience, wonder what's a stand-up comedian doing here? So for me, as comedians, we are brands as well. Just like marketers, we have to get our message across to different audiences. Our value proposition and our message doesn't change. Our audiences change. I've performed in 25 different countries. Just like you, we have to grab attention immediately. Today, Facebook, when they measure video views, if it's over 3 seconds, that is considered a view. So in an age of limited attention spans, we also have to grab attention immediately. You get feedback instantly on social media, we get feedback in the audience. From my point of view, I don't differentiate between new age media and old age media. That is a secondary part. I think the base questions of any campaign or communication remain the same. One, what do you want them to think, feel, or do as a result of your communication? And most importantly, why should they give a crap? Nobody has the time. We live in an age of 140 characters. If you cannot get their attention in the first 3 to 7 seconds, they're not there.
So we have two real new age marketers here. I think Kunal and CJ, and we have two others who have come in from the classical marketing space, and I think this is a good mix. But we are already getting questions, and Harish, I'd like to go back to what you said about trust, and there are a couple of questions about this. There's a question from Puneet, right? Puneet from a company called Atta. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. ATTHAH. Do you think the country needs a stringent policy and regulatory framework to ensure storytelling is more authentic? But then in a UGC environment, how do you set the boundaries and how do you enforce regulation? So the whole area around, look, you pointed out the problem. What's the solution? Is regulation a solution?
Okay. I very frankly don't believe regulation is the issue, because as much as self-regulation, I think marketeers need to wake up and understand that, hey, listen guys, we can't kill the goose that lays the platinum eggs for us. We have to be careful. We have to see how far we can stretch the storyline. Yes, I know, 3.5 years ago, storytelling was an art which got escalated to be a high science. I think we went berserk in that storytelling era. And I think we must tell stories, but I think the credibility line that you need to toe is a thin plimsoll line you must not cross. Because others aren't helping us. Politicians for one aren't helping us because they love storytelling. They love to push the gauntlet a little bit. If you really look at marketeers, we must not ape the politicians by and large. Because I think, when stories go berserk, I think consumers tend to trust you less and less. And I think brand trust is something that needs to be kept on top. The second point is, this business of digitalism versus physicalism, as I would call it. I think digitalism is a religion today. And I think digitalism spews a particular process into the market, which is 360 degrees, which is 1:1. Digitalism is quite like pure competition, everything is uniquely dispersed and everybody is equidistant, etc. I think it's important for responsible marketers to come together and say that, hey guys, let's not push this envelope too far. Let's read society better. Let's have a finger on the pulse of the consumer in a real proper manner. And let's not trust only digital mediums to measure consumer pulse. Because there's more to life than digital. Because once you get digital, you get larger than life. And that larger than life is maybe not truly representative of this country.
I'll just make a comment on trust, building a company around trust. So I'm just kind of addressing that. I think our family WhatsApp groups are great examples of understanding what's going on to the world. The under 25-year-olds clearly know when something is fake news or nonsense, right? And you can see that they're almost judging the elders when they do certain behavior and they share certain things and certain news. A lot of them keep quiet or call it out. I think the younger generation has a very good handle to understand what is trustworthy and not trustworthy. And that is primarily because they are very, very well versed with technology. Second thing is trust has got decentralized in the last...
Look, sorry, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Look, understanding and being comfortable with technology is one thing, but judgment on what is fake and not fake, why is it, according to the 25-year-olds, have it better than the older people?
Well, I think my personal take on that is that general awareness about things and just pattern detection has just become better. I'll give you a small example through decentralized trust. 10 years ago, coming to Delhi and getting a cab used to be a nightmarish experience because I would always get ripped off for the amount of money I was charged. Now we have Ola, Uber, where we have decentralized trust between driver and passenger, and Airbnb is another example where we have taken trust from brands, which was Meru at one point of time, to decentralize between two people to come together and work together. I think we are living in a time where trust is constantly go through entropy and get decentralized between two people, because technology allows you to interact and do commerce with other people in a trusted manner. Like, for example, Glassdoor is an example. Like, you can know if the company is treating their employees well by anonymously people posting about that company, and or ratings on an app is automatically creating trust among people. So this is people creating platforms for creating trust, and I think most people don't understand that.
That is the nature of the medium, where now everybody has a voice, right? 30 years ago, when I began my career in advertising, it was one-way communication, and you got feedback from market research, and sometimes, from the salespeople, right? But that is the nature of the medium, right? It's a natural outcome. Why is it people under 25 have better judgment? Well, if they do.
No, let's understand that systematically every generation is becoming smarter. If we accept that, this generation is systematically having more knowledge. I'll give you an example. When I was in college, and internet was...
how old are you?
I'm 39.
39, okay.
Important clarification.
He's not below 25, okay? Yeah.
When I was in college, internet had not come. I was in 12th grade, and somebody told me, I watched Terminator 2, and they told me, Kunal, in the US, Terminator 6 has already come. And I believed that guy. You try telling a 12-year-old any nonsense from your generation, they will do 30 seconds of Wikipedia and tell you that you are absolutely like bullshitting. That is the point that we are living in right now. And they have just reached a point where they have no tolerance for any nonsense.
Okay, great. So CJ, CJ, now you're different from several other industries where it's, yes, you are a stand-up comedian, but you very often have to produce new content. You can't keep on repeating the same thing because, you lose audience, right? So in a sense, and you are the factory, right? If you're not there, the stuff doesn't get produced. So how do you go about figuring out what your customer needs, wants, what will he like, what content, and how do you go about getting it?
So for us guys as well, creating content is an investment, right? Today, if I write 10 new jokes, maybe 3 of them will work. If a new comic does it, maybe 1 will work. So if I'm writing a new joke or trying it on, if I do 10 minutes of new stuff, it doesn't work, I've lost my audience. So I have to try 1 new joke in between 2 old ones, so in case it dips, it goes back up. So when we invest in creating content, now people often ask me, what content do people like? All over the world when you go, what grabs them? So here are 2 rules. Topical content is funnier and local content is funnier. So for example, I cracked that joke about Nirav Modi at the start of this. Now this joke will not be funny maybe 10 years from now, unless of course he still hasn't returned the money. So that's topical, right? But that doesn't pass the test of time. Local content is funnier. Now if I do a joke, so for example, I do a joke that says about Delhi and Bombay. Saying, as somebody who lives in Delhi, I don't understand the language they speak in Bombay. We call it bread, they call it pav. We call it pyaz, they call it kanda. We call it a servant quarter, they call it a 2 BHK. Right. Yeah.
Kunal is from Bombay, he doesn't appreciate this.
I just moved to Bangalore a year ago, so I'm fine. You can say that.
I love Bangalore, man. In Bangalore, you can party like a rock star until about 11:30 at night. So see, now that joke is funny for you. You clapped. If I was to crack that joke in Kuala Lumpur, it would mean nothing, right? So as marketeers, when you're catering to your audience, if right at the top you can do something that is local and specific to them, right? If you can micro customize, if you look at what Amul does, as topical as it gets. So if you start with that, then you can take them beyond their borders to your story. 80% of my material has to be stuff that is universal. I have to be able to do that in America, in India, in Kuala Lumpur. So that is my investment. If you talk about relationships, if you talk about international politics, that's the stuff that can work everywhere. So as comedians, we have to invest in deciding what we need to do to grab attention immediately, and then what we can do to tell our story. A couple of other points also I wanted to address. You spoke about earlier about authenticity, Sanjeev. As comedians, when we start performing, we want the confidence we can make people laugh. So we'll go for the easy joke, then we'll do observational comedy. Then we want to be seen as edgy, so we'll use bad language, we'll do politics, we'll pick on positions of authority. Eventually you find your own voice, and today I don't care what you think. I am going to do what I believe in, what is authentic to me, and your audience will find you. As marketeers, there are too many people who are trying to go after every audience. If you're telling people something you think they want to hear, but you don't believe it, they will see through it like this, exactly like you said. So at some point, you have to be authentic to your own brand, to your own message, and not go after every audience. The other point you spoke about, you mentioned feedback. Right? Now today, as a comedian, today you guys get feedback instantly on social media. I get the same thing in my audience. There's a 90% chance if I get on Twitter today and I message Vodafone and say, listen, my underwear is dirty, can you help? So thank you very much for your concern. A representative will call you back immediately. Right? I see comedians who do that. Somebody will heckle you, they have a standard pre-prepared response. No, you have to customize your response to the person in the audience. Today, for example, if a man heckles me, I can destroy him immediately. If a woman heckles me and I attack her, the audience will immediately think, what an ass. I have to wait until the point where she is spoiling it for the entire audience before I can go hard. So, for example, recently I had a woman who was very drunk, heckled me, and I said, oh, look, I'm being heckled by a woman with the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. You know? In fact, one eye is so beautiful, the other one can't stop looking at it. Right? Friendly, nice, sweet. But it got to a point where she was spoiling it for everyone, and then I could go hard. But my point is, as marketeers as well, today everyone wants to be treated as an individual. So if they're giving you feedback, I think you should address them as individuals, and that will benefit your brand as a whole.
Thanks. So Srinivas, you've heard the other end of the spectrum, no regulation. And you are from an industry where a lot of communication and marketing is regulated, right? Would you say that marketers in your industry are perhaps, as a consequence of regulation, behaving more responsibly than marketers in other industries? And is that good?
It's good and bad. I think our industry takes very little risk. We are not edgy. We don't do the edgy bit. We are very sensitive to the perception, or we're very sensitive to negative reaction. You know, we would have thought twice, thrice, 4 times before anything goes out there. It's good from a point of view of being a very responsible entity, because we're dealing with money. That's very important. But at the same time, it can curb creativity. And it also comes from the fact that we are classically trained to say this is the way an audience will usually react to your communication. And with this new age, social media, you know, the CTO at home, it's very tough for us to reach out to those kind of people. That's where the digital environment is kind of changing the communication that we are now doing. If you see the kind of work the mutual funds are doing today with mutual funds IA campaigns, and the kind of work that insurance companies are doing, are definitely moving towards, they're going away from the comfort zone, for sure. Right now, I don't see major impact of that. I don't see a lot of youngsters looking forward for investing in insurance or mutual funds. But I think as they grow into the next generation, when they start making enough money to buy these products, I think that's where our communication will hit them. So there is a long haul, and I don't think, you know, the classical advertising is gone away at all. We still need to build brands. People will take ages to build those brands. We need to invest in building credible brands. But there will also be this small-time banters where we look at a TG which will eventually evolve to become a serious TG for us.
तो ये अभी आपके लिए बच्चा पार्टी है.
But I wouldn't say that. Digital is an in thing, obviously, and I agree with Harish that, you know, there's no option. Everybody is there and we need to be there. But at this point of time, I think the trust factor plays a very important role, and we can't be funnier than required. We can't just be for the sake of visibility, do things which are just out of the Now we can't do wacky things. We need to be a little more serious in our communication.
So Harish, coming to you, one last topic before we formally open it to Q&A. So we've seen social media, right? There's been talk of regulating it, not regulating it, keeping it free. They are running battles. There are trolls here, trolls there, nationalism, anti-nationalism, and all of that. What's your take on this whole?
Well, let me start with nationalism. I think, nationalism is a train which everybody is boarding with gusto. And I think it's all about being topical and it's being at the right point of time. I think marketeers per se need to be very careful before boarding this train because nationalism cuts both ways. And I think we realize that. Very sensitive issues such as religion cuts both ways. Even more sensitive issues such as politics and taking sides on the subject of politics cuts both ways. So the marketeer, I think, needs to be a purer entity in this society. Yes, a lot of people tend to say that no, marketeers actually reflect society, they live in society, they must hold a mirror, etc. I don't believe that because I think some subjects must be left out of the bounds of marketing. Let a politician use nationalism, okay? Even that the Election Commission is against. But let not a marketeer use nationalism. I think it's a completely wrong thing to do because there's a certain degree of hollow nationalism that you and I tend to push as well when we become marketeers. Because at the end of the day, the marketer wants to benefit from whatever he is saying. No amount of woke or super woke or nationalism advertising is really altruistic. It's all about saying, what will I get at the end of it? So if I can monetize nationalism, I think it's a very, very wrong thing to do. And it's important to be careful. One other point I want to make is that, Kunal had a point to say that the younger you are, the more savvier you are. And to that extent, you look at advertising and say which piece of advertising is truthful and which is not. And most of the time, I have data from young people which says that younger you are, the less you believe in advertising. Younger you are, the less you're looking at formal pieces of advertising and getting swayed by it. Now, if that is the truth, and let's say if we are moving into a space where advertising is being trusted less and less by younger people, and the audience, 63% of this country is below the age of 35, what are we advertising for? Eventually, 90% of this country will not be believing advertising, but will be enjoying advertising. So is the marketeer creating a piece of advertising for the entertainment of people, or is he creating it for the bang for the buck that he or she deserves? So we have to be careful. Yet another issue, playing together with it, is that young people